Welcome to America's Top Rebbetzins. In the merit of this class, may Hashem watch over all the Jewish people and give enormous strength to the IDF soldiers, including Daniel ben Rivka, Daniel ben Yehudit, Daniel Raphael Mordechai ben Estel Siona, and David Amihai ben Jacqueline. Please click on the subscribe button to subscribe to us on the America's Top Rebbetzins YouTube page, or click follow to follow us on your podcasting app so that you're the first to know when an inspiring new episode is posted. Today, I am very happy to welcome Rebbetzin Natalie Ciner to our podcast. Rebbetzin Natalie is a Rebbetzin of Beth Jacob Congregation in Irvine, California. Previously, she was a Rebbetzin of Congregation at Ohav Shalom in New Hempstead, New York. Natalie is known for her legendary hosting and overseeing the Irvine Community Mikvah. Thank you so much, Rebbetzin Natalie, for being here. Please tell us more about yourself and what you do.
So thank you so much, Vera, for having me. It's truly an honor to be here, and Refuah Shalema and Amen to all those that you mentioned that we're davening for. So as you mentioned, I'm the Rebbetzin at Beth Jacob Congregation in Irvine, California. That's in Orange County, California. But above all, my most important and cherished role is being a mother of 7 wonderful children, ranging in age from 41 to 24. I'm a proud grandmother, Baruch Hashem, Bli Ayin Hara. I started my Rebbetzin journey in Israel. All my children were born there. Oh, wow. And we were there for about 19 years. And then from there to New York, and then to, like you said, in New Hempstead, and then to the West Coast. And Baruch Hashem, I've been privileged with my husband to grow a wonderful, warm community. I guess I would say that my greatest passion is fostering connection, like you mentioned, whether it's through hosting or teaching or mentoring. I'm a Taharat HaMishpacha teacher. Like you said, I oversee the Irvine Community Mikvah, and it's a really wonderful space. We service women from all walks of Jewish life. I also lead something called BJI2OC, which stands for Bringing Jewish Inspiration to Orange County. Oh, it's wow. An initiative that creates meaningful Jewish experience for OC, for Orange County women. We partner with an international organization called Momentum, and we bring women on a journey to Israel to connect to Jewish heritage, to their Jewish values and traditions, and to the land of Israel. And it's not just a trip, right? Because the women have to commit to a year of continued study when they return. And Baruch Hashem, many of them continue their journey way past that year. So I guess I see my role as helping people navigate life with a Torah perspective.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful. That like really touched me when you said that. Like I felt the energy when you said it. It's so beautiful because I also I resonate with that. Like I really also try to live my life that way. And the momentum trip. Thank you. And the momentum trip, I was actually on a momentum trip.
Oh, wow.
It was in 2015, so almost 10 years ago, the summer of 2015. So it was almost 10 years ago that I was on the trip. And if somebody is listening and, I'm going to include my email on the show notes. They can email me and ask. It's a really, really life-changing trip. It's for moms. I think at that time, maybe the rules are different, but you have to have at least one child who's under 18 living in your home with you.
Right.
Yes.
We're actually doing a trip in November, and they're allowing now, I think just because of what's going on in Israel, if you have a child, your youngest in college, but it's not going to be forever. So hop on the wagon. Anybody in Orange County hear this? We're going in November.
Wonderful. Thank you. And if anybody's interested in that trip through Orange County, I can connect you with Rebbetzin Natalie, and then she can tell you more. But it really is a life-changing trip. It's to Israel. You get to see a lot of the different historical sites. You get to experience Shabbat in the Old City, davening at the Western Wall. It's really, really, words can't do it justice. We can talk a whole hour about it, but words can't do it justice. It's really, really special. Please reach out if anybody has any questions. But today we're going to be talking about a topic that I personally believe will be very helpful to so many people. Anger management, specifically anger management in relationships. Our world is moving and changing so fast, and people could reach us at all hours of the day and night thanks to cell phones, laptops, and computers. And instead of working 9 to 5 in an office environment, some of us are working from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. They get home very late, or maybe you work from home. And when you work from home, the hours are endless. It's more than just from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. It's much more than that. And we do just so much work all the time, weekends, weekdays. And other people, as I was mentioning, work at home, which can sometimes be really, really hard because it feels like you're always at work and you really, really just never get that break. There's so much pressure and stress, and we don't have that leisurely family time or even the work family balance that people had a generation ago. We're always nervous. We're stressed out for one reason or for another. We do not take, I mean, who do we take our frustrations on? It's our family, our husband, our kid, the people who are closest to us, you know, and lashing out at others is really not healthy for them. And honestly, it's not healthy for us either. And it does nothing to promote good relationships. In fact, it's just the opposite. There's hope that we can learn to manage angry feelings and not take them out on our loved ones. And I'm really looking forward to learning strategies and pearls of wisdom about anger management. And Rebbetzin Natalie, I saw a video that you and your husband, Rabbi Yisrael Ciner, did together on YouTube, as we were saying before our conversation years and years ago, and it was specifically on how to avoid anger in relationships and how to manage, how marriage is a vehicle for growth, which I find fascinating, the whole concept that marriage is a vehicle for growth. So let's start there. So I know it's a loaded question, but how do you avoid anger in relationships, especially in marriage, when your partner can really get on your nerves and annoy you and just really drive you crazy?
So before we begin, I just want to say that what we're going to discuss is about navigating anger in healthy relationships, not
Yes.
physical or emotional or verbal abusive relationships, right? That's a totally different conversation.
Yes.
So anger is a natural emotion, right? Marriage is a close and intense relationship and can sometimes bring out the raw reactions, the raw emotions that we have, right? So the key isn't necessarily avoiding anger, it's learning how to navigate it in ways that strengthens the relationship instead of damaging it. So here are some fundamental ideas. So see marriage as growth opportunity, right? That's what we said. So marriage isn't about being comfortable, right? It's about becoming a better version of ourselves. So our spouse often acts as a mirror, reflecting back to us areas that we need to grow. So we need to view it as a divinely sent like signpost, this neon sign. Hashem is sending it, this situation, our way, tailor-made just for you, right? So instead of reacting with frustration, try asking, what is this situation teaching me about myself? Another thing is assume the best intention, right? Dan the kafzut, right? Because most of the time, our spouse isn't deliberately trying to annoy us, right? So when we approach the situation with the assumption that they mean well, it completely shifts how we interpret what their actions are, right? Express needs, not blame. So instead of saying, you never help me around the house, try saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Can you please help me with this, right? Because the second statement invites connection, while the first makes us defensive. And then lastly, like strengthen your connection daily. So a strong emotional bond reduces frustration. So simple acts like a kind text message, sending a heart emoji, words of appreciation, or just simply setting aside time to check in with each other each day, right? It builds relationship equity. And that way, small annoyances don't turn into big arguments.
I love that. And those are all so practical. They're not may not be easy to implement because it's
Right.
hard, when we're growing and we have to look inside of ourselves. Like the first one you said, that Hashem is sending us like a divine message through our husband, through the way that he annoys us, through what he does, or maybe what he doesn't do. What inside of myself do I have to change? That can get a little bit uncomfortable for us when we have to look inside. But I have a question when you were saying like express. I think a lot of women will relate to this. When you express needs and not blame, for sure, 100%. Like um, the kitchen is a mess. I've just baked so much for Shabbos, for holidays, for a party, can you please help me take out the garbage or wash the dishes or maybe take the kids into the other room, whatever it is. What do you do in a situation where like you can express nicely, but if the other person is not receiving what you're expressing?
Interesting. Right. So sometimes we just have to just realize, okay, you know, this might not be going in the direction that, because just because I'm saying it this way.
Right.
So, sometimes we have to either reframe, we have to step back, we have to also just we'll talk about some strategies, taking a breath, right? It's hard. And I think it's also you know, finding a time when you're not in that situation to be able to talk about, when I asked such and such, I was having a really hard day, and I needed help, and it was hard when this and this and this. So sometimes stepping out of the situation in the moment and realizing, okay, I'm not going to get it right now. I'm going to, and we do huff and puff a little bit, right? And this is going to come in some of the strategies of how we can maybe navigate through this. But we're not always just because we say it nicely. And this is also Hashem, right? We could ask Hashem, please, right? We don't always get the answer that we want. Right. So realizing that, okay, 1 minute, I might have to work on myself a little bit. Where is this coming from? Obviously, right, when things get too big, we might have to seek help, right? If we're really not managing to navigate. But it's also looking and saying, okay, am I giving him what he needs? Am I also listening to his needs? So I think, there's sort of a balance here of wanting to get what we feel we need, but also making sure that we are in kind doing the same. Because I think a lot of times when we do give the way the other to what the other person needs, it does eventually trickle back. Again, if we're in a healthy relationship and we're working through things, then hopefully that sort of give and take comes. And again, going back to that relationship equity, right? Building that, because when you can build that equity, you have a lot in the bank. So then hopefully these things that come up don't turn into big arguments. So it's work. Marriage is work. Good work. I like to say it's good work, important work, but it's work. And so trying to build that equity is very, very important.
I love, and I think that you hit the nail right on the head. I think, just, we don't walk into a relationship and there's a problem. It's like not like you're walking into a supermarket and you start arguing with the cashier. The cashier doesn't know you. You don't know the cashier. You're really starting from scratch, and that scratch is the argument. In a marriage, in a relationship, you have background, and the goal is to help it as much as you can to build a loving relationship in the background. So when a problem does come up in the foreground, when you are right now in a problem, you can use that equity in the bank, just like in the savings account. You can go into your emotional love savings account and draw on that to help pay for or deal with, in other words, the problem or the situation at hand. I really, really like that. And I actually want to ask you another question about that, because I think that's the crux of like what we're talking about. And we are going to get into the different strategies and how to, calm ourselves, in the heat of the moment. But I really, I would just want to flesh this out a little bit, because I feel like it's so important. So there's some people who are going to be listening who maybe they're newlyweds, maybe they've been married for 10 years, maybe they've been married for 30 years. There are people all across the board who are listening. Let's start off in like the most difficult case scenario. If you've been married 20, 25, 30 years, maybe even 40 years, and you haven't built, like you're broke. Your love bank account is broke, for lack of a better analogy. It makes it so much harder when these situations come up. What can we do? Like, not talking about the situation right now. What could we do to fill up that love bank account, that emotional bank account, and build that emotional equity?
So I think it is important at that point, to seek help, to go for counseling, because they will give you tools, right? It could be that, sometimes people figure that out, right? In marriage, sometimes they figure it out as they go along. I just spoke to a newlywed yesterday, I think it was, who they're reaching a year, sort of some bumps in the road, right? That's growing pains,
Right.
but and hopefully then, right, you grow and you develop from that. But there's nothing wrong. It's really important to seek help and to try, and sometimes people need guidance in how the tools to use in order to communicate. A lot of times it comes down to how are we communicating to each other? Are we giving each other the love that they need in the way that they need it? And so all of that, that's so important in order, right? You can't just sit back and think, that's going to be, you're getting that equity in the bank, it's
Right.
just going to come. Like I said, it takes work. So if you're struggling, there's nothing wrong with going for counseling. That doesn't mean like, oh no, my marriage is over, right? That
Right.
means that it's so important to you, you want to seek help. And finding that right person, the therapist that's going to help you. Going to couple therapy is sometimes really extremely important, and it really strengthens a relationship.
Right. It's true. It's true. And also, I wanted to also emphasize, I mean, couples therapy is really the ideal here in this particular situation. But if one of the spouses doesn't want to go, I think it's okay to go by yourself also. And I think that could be very effective.
100%, because that way, it's sometimes it's what can I do? Right. I mean, not that you're going to look and constantly blaming yourself. Sometimes you have to let go, though, of what you expected. And then how do you navigate in the situation that you're in?
Right.
And then,
Exactly.
right, because when we change our actions, right, then sometimes the situation changes.
It's 100%. That's true. And speaking of that, so we start, I guess, at the worst case scenario. So what if it is like somebody like a newlywed, maybe they've been married a year, 5 years, 6 years, somebody who at the beginning of that journey, what can they do? I mean, they're just starting out together to build that love equity in the bank.
Right. So it's, when they have the time, when they're younger and they don't, have a lot going on, making sure that they're putting in the time to spend with each other, to communicate to each other, to let each other really know how they're feeling in any given situation, and realizing that they're coming from two different places. I remember, I came from a girl's house, and we all talked, girls, but we had a talk, we're talking over each other. And my husband came from a boy, boy's house, and they were quieter. I mean, it was just, and I just remember when we first got married, it was sort of like, okay, say something, like, answer me, even in frustration. And I realized, like, okay, we communicate differently. And I just had to sometimes just even realizing that, and appreciating it, um and learning to deal with that different. We're coming from two different places. And so I think, just taking the time then to really spend with each other. It's not the quantity, it's the quality of time that you spend together. Is extremely important. That builds that foundation. Those are those roots that take hold, and then you can grow, a beautiful tree. So it's really putting in the time, I think, when you're first starting out.
I think that's very well said because as we're talking and as you're making me think of things that have happened with people that I know, and it really is taking the time. It's because time builds connection. When you spend time with somebody, it could be out to dinner or not, or it could be just at home. It could be doing an activity like taking a walk together, or you could even be cleaning up together in the kitchen. It doesn't have to be one specific, date night. You always have to go out. It doesn't always have to be date night. It's very nice when it is, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't always have to be one specific thing or one specific restaurant or one specific activity. I think that just the act of spending quality time talking to each other, connecting to the other person, learning about them. And you think, oh, I've been married to him 7 years already. I know everything. But it's really, believe it or not, it's not always true. You learn things about people, no matter how long you've been married to them, even little itsy bitsy things, maybe something that happened to them when they were 3 years old. Oh, wow, I didn't know that, and you've been married to them all this time. It's really, really interesting because I also feel like you can learn things from other people in the way that they handle situations. Like if your husband comes to you and says, such and such happened at work, or such and such happened, with a friend or at shul or wherever it is. And then you say, okay, so tell me more. What did you say? How did you handle it? You can learn even more about your spouse, about the way that he handled the situation.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that it's just the communication, the spending
Yeah.
time together that really is what builds. I remember when, as a kid, my parents, they would get a babysitter and they would go do grocery shopping,
Yeah.
Thursday nights, whatever, together. As a kid, I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so lame. Like but then I realized, like, you could have quality time. Yeah, going grocery shopping, you can. You just have to create that space, and let it happen. And it doesn't have to be the vacation and the going away and the hike it's just really connecting wherever.
It's beautiful. It's so funny. I remember a friend of mine once told me she went on a date with her husband to Target. It was the funniest thing, but it's so true, just like what you're saying. So, it's one thing to stop the anger from forming, like if you really, before you let it out, it's one thing to stop the anger from forming, but it takes much more self-control and not to yell or lash out when you're already angry, when the anger is already there. So what do you do once the anger is already there? How do you prevent yourself from having an adult temper tantrum? And you don't want to risk hurting someone you love. In other words, how do you control your anger before your anger controls you?
Yeah. So once you're in that moment of frustration, right, it's much harder to prevent the outburst.
Yes.
Um, yeah, for sure. But here are some strategies, right?
Yes.
So like we mentioned, pause before reacting, right? Actually,
Mhm.
the Ramban in Igeret Ramban, in his famous letter, he advises, accustom yourself to always speak calmly and you will be saved from anger, right? So taking a breath or a short break, right, before responding, it can prevent a damaging reaction. And usually those we always later regret, right?
Yes.
And it's okay to take time out, right, before speaking, because you can actually even say to your spouse, I need a moment, I need an hour, right? I need to calm down. And that way we can have a productive conversation, right? Because before you say it, you control it. After you say it, it controls you, you know? When my kids were younger, um, because it goes for any relationship, any close relationship, kids,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
I mean, Baruch Hashem, we had a busy household, and there were days where just they pushed my button, kid could
Of
push your button.
course.
They know how to push your buttons.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'd have to stop and say, your father's going to deal with this. And it wasn't that, oh, I'm putting this on your father, but it was because I knew it wasn't coming from a place of chinuch. Like it was coming from a place of frustration. And so it's so important that we approach things not from that place of anger or frustration, that we take a moment, even change your physical state, right? Take a walk, just breathe deeply, right? Just
Yeah.
just take a few minutes to breathe. In fact, breathing is really amazing. And I realized this, my husband and I, when we lived in Israel, so he he taught me how to drive stick shift. I don't advise that, not the stick shift part, but having your husband teach you, it could be a little stressful, especially in Israel. And so I mastered the stick shift for the most part. So we lived we lived outside of Jerusalem. And so it was like, okay, time to go on the highway. So we went on the highway and going uphill, and it's like behind a slow moving Egged bus. And my husband says to me, downshift. You have to downshift and switch lanes. And it was getting a little tense in the car. And I could imagine for people who drive stick, like that you could go from third down to second while you're on the highway. So instead of yelling, I realized I started breathing. And to the point where my husband said, Natalie, you are not having a baby, just downshift and switch lanes. So but I realized that instinctively, I started breathing. And
Right.
that really can calm you and diffuse the situation a little bit. So ladies, your labor breathing can come in handy not only when you're in labor, um, but also use self-talk, right? Ask yourself, is this argument really worth the emotional energy, right? Because many times anger subsides when we put things into perspective,
Yes.
you know, and then also shift the reaction to curious self-reflection, right? So instead of reacting harshly, ask yourself, why is this triggering me, right? Is this about the situation or is it tapping into something deeper, right? Sometimes it's not even that, it's just setting us off. Like I said, pushing buttons, right? Why does that specifically get me? Why does that trigger me?
I love that. Actually, I just had that moment yesterday. It was also with a child. It wasn't with us. But you're right. Relationships are relationships, especially close relationships, family relationships. And I didn't, I had overheard something. I wasn't even in the situation. I overheard one child talking to another child, and they happened to have said something about me and about something that I did. And I really wanted to, I was upset, but I didn't say anything. They didn't even know that I was listening. They still don't know that I'm listening, that I was listening,
I don't know.
Yes. And I really just wanted to go downstairs and just like I was just so to express myself, and I didn't because I knew that form of expression was not going to be good. And I thought about it, and that's exactly what I thought. I'm like, I'm really upset that she said that. But what about it is upsetting me? Is it that she said it, or is there some truth behind it? Like what is really triggering me? So there was, I mean, for sure there was truth behind it, and I had to really, again, like we were saying at the beginning, like deal with things that are in yourself that are really unpleasant to look at. So, yes. Yeah. No, but I love that. I love what you said, about taking deep breath and just you're putting space between the situation and yourself. So you're not reacting right away. You're giving yourself time to reflect, to maybe choose the right words, or maybe just to even introspect and self-reflect, like why is this really bothering me, which is really so, so important.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. Um, so okay, so then which brings me to the next point. If you are angry, like really, really angry, and you took time to self-reflect, you took time to put space between yourself and the situation, you did your deep breathing, and like it's a situation where you simply must express your anger. Like you have to say something. It's not a situation where you can stay silent, in other words. What are some ways to express your anger constructively? So it doesn't come off as an outright assault and the person stops listening to you.
Right. So I think we have to shift our thinking from expressing our anger constructively to expressing our feelings, our frustrations in a healthy way, like in a non-angry, non-aggressive way, right?
Mhm.
So, but if we don't express it, it can lead to resentment.
Right.
So, um, I think going back to, like I said before, the I statements are really important, right? Instead of saying like, you're so inconsiderate, right? Say something like, I felt hurt when you didn't call me to tell me that you were going to be late, right? Because it focuses on your feelings rather than attacking the other person. So I think that that's really important, is to realize like our words are not to attack, but to sort of work on our feelings, right? Also choosing the right timing, right? So you don't want to bring up sensitive issues when, you or your spouse are already like exhausted or stressed, right? So you want to pick a time when you can have a calm, open discussion. We spoke about that before, right? It's like knowing, like bringing it back when you're at a calmer place. You're not sweeping it under the carpet. Sometimes you realize, okay, it's not worth talking about, right? Or I could just laugh
Right.
about it now, right? Not sweeping it under the carpet, but you're shelving it for a better time, right? Because you want to address it so that it doesn't necessarily come up again, right? But you're not going to get anywhere if in the heat of the moment, right? And that's like focus on solutions and not blame. So instead of dwelling on what went wrong, right? Ask yourself, how can I prevent this from happening in the future, right? Because this is like, he does this, and yet, but it's just like, okay, that's true. Let's look for not blame, let's look for a solution. And sometimes that can help, to sort of figure it out without making it explode.
I really like that because it's your focus. Like, are you focused on blaming the other person or are you focused on finding a solution to the issue at hand? It really makes a whole difference. It really, really does. Because, if you're focused on blaming the person, the only thing that's going to happen is the other person is going to get defensive. And then you're going to have another argument. Why are you so defensive? You did this, take responsibility. It's going to blow out into such proportion that's going to have nothing to do with the original thing that happened in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
you know
exactly.
and I love just like even the whole mindset of being solution oriented. I just think it's helpful, like generally speaking, like for everything, if you
Right.
have a problem and you need to solve it, just try to brainstorm for solutions. Don't take it out of context, just focus on the problem at hand.
Exactly. Because it's not about being right,
Right.
right? At the end of the day, you want to build a relationship.
Right.
So put that being right aside and figure out what can we do to sort of make this right,
To build a
to build a
relationship.
relationship.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so, one last question, but it's an interesting question because some people say that you should yell and vent your feelings because it's not good to suppress your emotions. So, what are your thoughts on that? Is it good to just let your anger hang out? Like, what do you feel about, there's these school of thoughts like, if you don't say it, like we were saying before, if you don't say it, it's gonna be suppressed and you're gonna end up resenting the person. And some cultures even just have this philosophy of like letting it all out, just like yelling, 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 yelling for 20, 30 minutes and then you're done. And others are more like, pushed down, refined, and don't say anything and don't speak about it. What are your thoughts about that? Like how to handle those like overwhelming, huge feelings?
So obviously yelling or venting at the person is going to add fuel to the fire, right? Because
Right.
you think you're making sense, but typically you're not.
Right.
And you don't want to become that raving, lunatic,
Lunatic.
right? So,
Yes.
and our sages actually compare anger to drunkenness, right? When a person is drunk, they think that they're sharing pearls of wisdom and insights, but actually, usually at the end, they're not making all that much sense, right? So but like you said, it's also not good to suppress your emotions, right? But there are different ways of expressing those emotions, some that are constructive, right? And some that aren't. So we have to like realize that, right? We don't just, we can't just keep it in. But there is, like you said, there's this common belief that anger, like venting anger, helps release tension.
Right.
But it's actually interesting because there's actually research that shows that venting often reinforces anger rather than diffusing it. So
Yes.
actually yelling activates your body's stress, response, and it
Yes.
floods the system with adrenaline and cortisol, and that heightens rather than decreases anger, right?
Right.
And sometimes you see that, right? When you're yelling, it's just sort of like you get all worked, when they say you get worked up.
Yeah.
So, you shouldn't, suppress, but you should channel the anger in productive ways. So like journaling is good, or even writing an email that you're not going to send. Like, don't even put in the email address, but you write that email and you press that send button. There's something good about that. It feels good, even though it's not going to go anywhere. Or talk to a trusted mentor, or like we spoke about before, a therapist, right? Because writing things down or speaking to someone who's objective, and you have to be careful of who you speak to, can help, process those feelings in a calmer way. Be very careful, because sometimes friends are not necessarily the best place to go, or even in marriage, like mothers, don't go to your mother because they
Oh,
can
that's
pick you up.
interesting.
It's very hard. Mothers are hard. I mean, think about when somebody hurts your child, it's very hard to let go of that. And
Yeah.
they could be fine. I remember when one of my sons, when he was younger, and I don't know, a friend, I wasn't nice to him or something. And probably about, I don't know, 2 hours later, they're arm in arm, they're walking away. But it was really something that was very hurtful. And it really stayed with me. I had a hard time, because somebody hurt my child, right?
Right.
So that's what I mean. You do sometimes have people say, well, they always side with, my spouse, that, their son-in-law, but
Right.
it's very important that you speak to the right person, right? That's important. Or redirecting your energy, right, into something positive, like physical exercise. Some people are really into that, taking a walk, that's really good. Or even doing an act of, chesed, an act of kindness, right? It can transform the frustration into something meaningful. Because when I go beyond myself, I feel good, right? And then that could help put things in perspective, right? Or even reframing the situation, instead of focusing on the negative, try to find the lesson or the growth opportunity, right? Because sometimes if we stop and we look at it and we say, um, that person must be having a hard day. And it's much easier, right, when you're in a store and I don't know, somebody's obnoxious or something, and you could just sort of say, oh, that person's having it, must be having a hard day, and you could become more compassionate. But we really need to practice that at home also, and
Right.
realizing that sometimes it's not about us. It could be, that they're struggling somehow.
Right. Our spouse, our children, those people closest to us, a family member, a mother, a sibling. Yeah, definitely. It
Exactly.
it's for sure. It's for sure. And I said that was the last question, but I just want to ask you one just teeny question because I really want to I want to give people as much hizuk as possible. And the question I want to say is, um, people really do struggle with their anger. Like it really, really is a real thing, and the struggle is real, and it's not easy. Nobody wants to be the angry, yelling wife. And I know that we discussed different ways to keep anger at bay and how to express it without causing emotional damage, which is so important. But for people who are truly, genuinely looking to change themselves, like I'm talking about real change, like not just for this problem, for this situation, like genuine looking to change and transform themselves and subdue their angry tendencies. Because some people are just like they're just generally angry people, just like genetically, just like they were born with that anger tendency. Can you please share with us just maybe some last words of wisdom or even more basic practical strategies or even a story of inspiration for just to help people manage their anger? Because this is something that people are struggling with, and I just don't want them to lose hope. Like, I feel like there's hope for everybody, even in the most dire situations. If somebody's really looking to change themselves, I feel like with that deep desire, they can.
Yeah. So if a person really wants to work on anger management, there are definitely some like daily habits that can help, right? So start your day with gratitude, which is Jews, that we know, right?
Yes.
We say Moda'ani in the morning. But anger often comes from a place of entitlement, right? Feeling things should be a certain way.
Yes.
By consciously appreciating. So that's the key word, consciously, like not just modality, right? But really stopping and consciously appreciating what we have. That way we could, reduce frustration over what we don't have, right? Strengthening your amuna, right? Because when we internalize that everything comes from Hashem, even the moments that frustrate us, it becomes like easier to react with patience and trust rather than anger, right? Create a reaction plan, right? So before an argument happens, commit to a strategy. Is it going to be, I'm going to take deep breaths, I'm going to count to 10, I'm going to take a walk, whatever it is, right? Because the more we practice, the more natural those responses become, right? Practice makes perfect, right? It's important to look back when we reacted with anger and realize, okay, that wasn't our better self, and analyze the situation and then think, what should I have done differently? And that way, when the situation comes around again, we'll hopefully handle it well, right? And sometimes we blow it again, but that just means that, okay, how can I change it? And it's interesting. There's actually, I always find this so fascinating, a brain mapping study, and it showed that when a person was instructed to raise their hand, right, specific areas in the brain lit up. And then interestingly, when they told the person to imagine raising their hand, the same brain regions were activated. And so by imagining what we will do, right, it can help create neural pathways and making it easier to turn that vision into reality. So it's fascinating. And then there's also tefillah, right? Just asking Hashem, talking to Hashem and asking for help in a specific situation or with the anger that you might have, right? So that's extremely important. I should have put that at the top of the list. I guess in summary, right, marriage and relationships, they're not about avoiding challenges, right? They're about learning how to navigate them with wisdom and kindness. And we only control ourselves. We can't control others. We can control how we react to others when they've done something. And Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning famously said, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given situation, set of circumstances or situation. I don't remember exactly. But by working right on ourselves, we don't just improve our marriages, we become the best version of ourselves.
That was so beautifully said. Like that is the crux. That's like really, really what it's about. And I actually think that sometimes Hashem gives us this test of anger so that we can reach that, so we can become the better version of ourselves by doing all this work that we've been talking about today to like buffing a diamond, like polishing a diamond, like when you get it from the mine. It's not the one that you're gonna wear on your finger. It really, really has to be buffed and polished, but then it sparkles and shines so beautifully. Just like us, when we go through these challenges, like we're being buffed and we're being made to be made smooth and to be more refined and more elevated and like you said, the best version of ourselves. So that's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rebbetzin Natalie, for joining us on America's Top Rebbetzins. And in the merit of this class, may Hashem watch over all the Jewish people and give enormous strength to the IDF soldiers, including Daniel ben Rivka, Daniel ben Yehudit, Daniel Raphael Mordechai ben Estelle Siona, and David Amihai ben Jacqueline. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Amen.